Are you trying to activate your divine feminine energy? Looking for a high-value man? Need tips on leveling up your life? Well, you've come to the wrong place. Hey guys, it's Amanda, and today I'm going to be talking about the femininity movement, the rise of self-proclaimed femininity coaches and gurus on social media who create self-help content to teach women how to dress, act, talk, eat, walk, and think more femininely. Usually, the goal of all this primping and priming is to attract and keep a high-value man. A lot of the advice seems to reinforce archaic gender roles and generally contrasts with the modern girl boss era of feminism we're in right now, but it is a somewhat prominent subculture, especially among Black women. So today I want to explore the feminine urge to be feminine. Before we get into that though, I would like to thank BetterHelp for sponsoring today's video. BetterHelp is a professional online counseling service that securely assesses your needs and matches you with your own licensed professional therapist who you can start talking to within 48 hours of signing up. It's not a crisis line nor self-help, but there is a broad range of expertise in BetterHelp's 20,000 plus therapist network, which may not be available to you locally. BetterHelp is available worldwide, anyone can use it, and you can log into your account anytime and send a message to your counselor. I know that if therapy wasn't available to me online, I probably never would have tried it, and I'm so glad that I did. You get timely and thoughtful responses, plus you can schedule weekly video or phone sessions. BetterHelp is committed to facilitating great therapeutic matches, and they make it free to change counselors if needed. It's more affordable than traditional offline counseling, and financial aid is available. BetterHelp wants you to start living a happier life today, so visit betterhelp.com/AmandaMariana to join the over 1 million people taking charge of their mental health. That's BetterHelp to get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/AmandaMariana. Alright, back to the feminine urge to be feminine. First and foremost, I think it's important to define femininity. According to Google, it is qualities or attributes regarded as characteristic of women. Although we commonly associate femininity with warmth, gentleness, and nurturing qualities, it's important to note that femininity concerns gender, which is socially constructed, meaning that feminine traits that we associate with women are not necessarily innate, but they are social and psychological distinctions created by our culture and upbringing. This is not to be confused with sex differences, which are biological distinctions that spring naturally from physical features. Because gender roles have had such an important role in societies for so long, it's easy to conflate stereotypical social traits with nature. I actually took a class last semester called Love Actually. It was all about relationship science, and I learned about the terms instrumental and expressive, which describe historically gendered traits in a more objective way. Instrumental refers to task-oriented talents that are usually associated with masculine traits such as assertiveness, self-reliance, ambition, leadership, and decisiveness, while expressive refers to historically feminine social and emotional skills like warmth, tenderness, compassion, kindness, and sensitivity to others. It's also important to note that gender and traits associated with certain genders aren't binary, but more of a spectrum. Think of instrumental, masculine, and expressive feminine traits as two separate sets of skills that can range from high to low in both men and women. I was actually referencing my notes from class when brainstorming for this video, and according to my textbook, the happiest, most effective, mentally healthy people out there possess both sets of skills, and marriages in which both spouses adhere to stereotyped gender roles are generally less happy than those of non-traditional couples. Which makes sense to me because the most feminine girl and the most masculine guy have no overlapping characteristics. You just don't have as much in common. And to be clear, this is concerning characteristics, not necessarily appearance. You could dress in a typically feminine way, but also have instrumental traits like assertiveness and ambition. Despite this, femininity coaches, I am gonna not be able to say femininity. I'm not going to be able to say that by the end of this video. Despite this, femininity coaches are dedicated to teaching women how to reject any semblance of masculinity in favor of feminine energy. This message isn't necessarily new, it's just in the form of YouTube videos instead of good old-fashioned charm school. So charm school isn't just the name of a short-lived Flavor of Love spinoff. It's where young women were sent to learn social graces like good posture, air kiss etiquette, which fork to use, and how to acquire a husband. Charm schools, also known as finishing schools, saw their heyday in the 18th and much of the 19th century, but by the 1960s, their popularity decreased dramatically due to shifting attitudes towards women's role in society. Finishing schools and etiquette classes are not a complete relic of the past, but it's more kitsch cottage industry than cultural institution now. Funny enough, I actually had to take an etiquette class when I was a kid because I was a part of what can only be described as a sorority for children. This is one of those memories that's like a grayed out tab on a computer screen. Like, you can't actually click on it and recall what exactly happened, but you know you were there. Basically, we had to learn how to be ladylike and got scolded a lot. And at the end of the year, there was this cotillion, which we had to be a part of. And it was a whole thing. We had to get fitted for custom dresses and learn a dance. It was, yeah, that was, I don't know, weird memory from childhood. Anyway, that was my brief brush with a charm school of sorts, which I'm pretty sure I didn't like then, but now if I was offered the opportunity to take an etiquette class, I would do it because I kind of find following arbitrary rules to be fun. Also, most modern etiquette classes are kind of aware of their old-fashioned origins and seem less about molding unwilling tomboys to fit rigid gender norms and more about providing willing participants a crash course on contemporary etiquette, which is increasingly gender neutral. However, femininity coaches online lean into a more archaic version of gender rules and roles, and a lot of it is directed toward Black women, so why do people watch these videos? It's well known that Black women have historically been stereotyped as strong, aggressive, loud, and masculine as a result of our bodies having been historically exploited and objectified. I've talked about this in a few different videos on my channel, and I always think it's important to emphasize that these stereotypes did not come from any inherent truth about Black women, and they also didn't come out of thin air. Stereotypes are used to justify actions. For example, in the United States, racist stereotypes didn't cause slavery, but people used them to justify the enslavement of Black people. Anyway, it's hard to pinpoint the origin of Black femininity YouTube, but it's pretty clear that it is a response to the masculinization of Black women that has occurred for centuries. Black women in particular watch these videos because they feel like they need to strip themselves of these stereotypical labels and want to be perceived as more feminine because that usually leads to better treatment. So if you've never come across this femininity content, it usually features a really put together woman or a bunch of Pinterest photos of put together women and advice about how to be more feminine. Some of the advice seems pretty harmless and just like basic self-help / self-improvement type things, such as be open to receiving compliments, be polite, or be emotionally intelligent. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be those things and wanting to improve yourself in that way. In fact, what I find strange is that these things are branded as femininity tips when they don't really have anything to do with being a woman. Like, anyone can be those things. However, there is femininity advice out there that is problematic because it leans into archaic gender roles that place a premium on changing yourself to fit within a rigid mold of what it means to be a feminine woman. A popular video that many of these feminine coaches make is masculine behaviors to stop.
So this first tip that I have for you dolls is something that can happen just very easily. Sometimes it depends on where you grew up, who you're around, based off of your past experiences, or sometimes it just happens, and that would be speaking aggressively. This is something that is not feminine at all.
Advice ranges from avoid planning dates because it is doing energy, which is masculine, to stop trying to compete with men because they have certain traits that women just don't possess. To be fair, some of these coaches recognize that it is unrealistic to only have feminine energy and admit that there are certain times and places for masculine energy, but my biggest thing is just like, why can't you be yourself? I feel like it creates unnecessary stress to worry about if you're putting masculine or feminine energy out there. If the goal of this is to be a pleasant person, that shouldn't be gendered. But two of the biggest issues with these femininity coaches is that their advice largely centers around changing yourself for a man in order to be in a relationship, and that it places too much of a premium on respectability and appearance. So let's talk about the man issue first. A huge part of femininity content is centered around dating and relationships, with the end goal being to marry a high-value man. This is also known as hypergamy, the practice of marrying up into a higher social class. In an article on femininity coaching in Refinery 29, Shantae Joseph sums up the issue with how femininity coaches tend to frame these kinds of relationships. There are a million ways to be a woman, yet as these coaches proliferate, women from all walks of life are being taught or even groomed to secure a financially stable marriage where there is no incentive for the man to be perfect for the woman. All he has to do is fulfill the nondescript role of provider. Femininity coaches frame marrying up as a form of empowerment, and while it can financially empower the women who are able to do so, that's as far as its empowerment extends. It's not really doing anything to improve the position of women as a whole. It's interesting because this idea of marrying rich and being a housewife has kind of gained traction even in more lighthearted, joking contexts. And obviously, I understand where people are coming from. Like, if you didn't have to work in an office for 40 hours a week, why would you? But I think this rhetoric inadvertently implies that being a housewife isn't real work, which is far from true. Femininity, especially the version these coaches promote, is heavily associated with taking care of the household. But this notion has less to do with the nature of women and more to do with the nature of capitalism. I'm always going to find a way to incorporate capitalism into this. Don't you worry. Italian feminist Silvia Federici coined the concept of the patriarchy of the wage, which is the idea that under capitalism, wage relations are used to create and maintain gender hierarchies. In a 2017 interview with Revolutionary Left Radio, Federici talks extensively about this idea, which she wrote about in her book, Caliban and the Witch. She notes that with the advent of capitalism, the whole area of reproductive activity, housework, procreation, etc., is declared off the economic radar. This, she says, is one of the major transformations that takes place in social relations. In this interview, Federici shows how housework became feminized under capitalism, and I'm just going to quote this big-ass chunk of transcript because she says it so well. In the feudal period, or in any society where production is for consumption, you don't have a separation between production and reproduction. If you have a community or village where the peasantry produces for its own use, you don't have a separation between production and reproduction because what you produce is also reproducing you. For example, today in many parts of Africa or Latin America, the process of reproduction or domestic work begins by putting seeds in the land. You grow food, you grow enough for the market, but you also grow enough for your family. It's what you eat. So that agricultural labor, that subsistence agriculture, is production and reproduction at the same time. You don't have the separation. But with capitalism, that changes drastically. You begin to see a bifurcation. The two activities, production and reproduction, begin to separate in all kinds of ways. Production for the market becomes a male job, and it's a wage job. It's a job that is actually socially recognized as work, as producing wealth. Whereas more and more reproductive work, raising of children, procreation, domestic work, care for the elderly, that becomes women's work. So reproduction becomes feminized and also at the same time completely devalued. It's not recognized as work. It's not given a wage, it's not paid, and increasingly it becomes so invisible as work that it's naturalized. It's considered women's labor, with the idea that somehow it's something that women do because they are women. It's not socially or historically defined as work. So this separation is very important. It's part of the reason why in capitalism you have a gender hierarchy. Men have power over women through the wage. Through the wage, men control women's reproductive labor in the family. Through the wage, the state delegates to the men the power to control women's work. to make sure they perform. And that's why domestic violence has always been tolerated. It's understood that it's okay to slap your wife if she doesn't cook or keep the house clean. It's a part of the discipline. So there's a whole patriarchal structure that is created in capitalism to ensure that the reproduction of the working class does not cost anything to the capitalists, or that it costs very little. For free, women do all the work that the capitalists would have to do in order to enable millions of people to go to work every day. So the infrastructure that the capitalist class would have had to create to enable people to go to work every day is unfathomable. Women have really done an enormous amount of work, and for no pay, for no recognition. The fact that housework has been invisibilized and devalued is not accidental. It has nothing to do with women's bodies and personalities. To achieve that feat saves the capitalist class billions of dollars. Women have a big bill to present to the capitalist class. They have provided an enormous amount of work that otherwise the capitalists would have had to provide. End quote. I've kind of felt like there was something inexplicably icky about this modern femininity movement, and it kind of just boils down to the fact that it promotes traditional gender roles in the name of innate femininity, when it's really unpaid labor disguised as women's natural disposition. As we can see, the origins of traditional notions of femininity are problematic, but it is understandable that Black women, who have been denied access to this femininity for so long, now see the opportunity to embrace it as a form of liberation. However, femininity coaches tend to overemphasize the importance of appearance and respectability politics. I think a lot of Black women have felt this paradox, especially in pop culture, where we're either completely invisible or only seen when hypersexualized. And to some, this femininity coaching version of femininity seems like a middle ground. Ironically, I think a lot of the issue with this content is that it can also be too extreme. It places femininity in a rigid mold that is highly based on appearance, with rules of what feminine women should and shouldn't wear. There's no denying that how you look influences how people treat you, and presenting in a more feminine way, especially as a Black woman, can often get you better treatment. So it's easy to see why these coaches truly believe they are doing their audience a favor, but it doesn't change the fact that we shouldn't have to change how we look in order to be treated with basic respect or kindness. And now for my final thoughts. I originally wanted to make this video because I just found the concept of femininity coaching to be very bizarre, since one, it's something that is kind of hard to actually define, and two, it's something that isn't really taught, it's just absorbed depending on one's culture and upbringing. I do see how the things femininity coaches teach might help women gain more confidence in themselves and their appearance, but I think it's a mistake to brand femininity as a thing that can and should be achieved by adopting certain aesthetics or behaviors. And while these coaches are certainly promoting positive qualities like being caring and compassionate, it doesn't sit well with me that those things even need to be gendered. Not to mention the more problematic promotion of changing your disposition to be more docile or submissive in order to please a man. Femininity coaches brand femininity as some innate thing that women need to unlock from within, but it's simply not true. Cooking, cleaning, and smiling while doing it is not innate to women. It's innate to the capitalist notion that women's reproductive labor should be invisible and free. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. As always, looking forward to hearing your thoughts down below, and I'll see you next time. Bye!